Good evening. Space News Report this week, March 5th through 8th, 2019, covers my UFO records, and I show how the Western governance has failed any ET or visitor hospitality function. I don't know if it's out of fear surrounding what might happen, but it's not due to any known attack. We'll go into the kinds and formats that ET visits take. My information from George Filer's files says that over 150,000 UFO sightings have been documented in the last 60 years, which is something like 2,500 per year. However, surveys show that many more sightings occur but don't ever get reported. I'll be talking about David Paulides and his take on the number of disappearances which people label as abductions in the United States alone, and how that might bear on our fears about what ETs do and don't do. And finally, I'm looking at the testimony of the Syrian by the name of Ariel, who came with a domain and was shot down at the Roswell crash, and who, after a few weeks of learning English, was able to testify about the intentions of the domain with respect to our world now. So let me get our slides going here. Start. And we have many photographs of the visitors, and we have carvings of the visitors, and we have paintings of the visitors. The carvings are predominantly in South America, where the Incas and the Aztecs carved the pictures of ETs into stone. In Africa, the Dogon tribe, a couple thousand years ago, received fish god visitors who set up a society among the Dogon which is peaceable and civil to this day. There are 700,000 Dogon in Mali. In our medieval paintings, there are pictures of saucer craft and of squadrons of saucer craft going back about 500 years. And so there's no way that scientists can claim that they don't think there's any more life in the universe when we have the pictorial records of paintings and pictures. We have Sumerian cuneiform tablets which tell the whole story of the Anunnaki relationship on our world with the gold mining that they got invested and involved in Africa and in South America. When Ningishita took the gold mining to South America, they needed the gold in order to chemtrail, their atmosphere on Nibiru, because they were having a pollution problem, which kind of relates to where we are today. The coins you're seeing are from the 1600s, and they show saucer craft that we see even now. So there's no excuse for scientific prognosticators to claim that there's no proof of life anywhere but on the earth. They're just being silly, and we know this. Here we have pictures of squadrons of ETs coming over the mountains. And this was probably about 500 years ago. So it's surprising to me that the Illuminati among the Earth leadership didn't take this step to initiate a program, a plan of being hospitable to the visitors. That would have been a very appropriate thing to do. It would be a very appropriate thing to do even today. As David Paulides talks about the number of people who disappear, and in the United States, 800,000 people a year get reported as missing. And after all the evidence gets sorted and the people go home and they get found and so on and so forth, about 40,000 of them vanish, all right? And the tradition of Tartary and the Vatican and the Masons has always been secrecy. And this secrecy has been a major obstacle in our being able to know the history and the reputation and the characteristics of ETs who visit our world. In late 1928, the Germans were downloading information through the Vril Society to back engineer saucer craft that the Anunnaki had given them directions for. All right, so the Anunnaki, being a conquering race, who are mostly 5th through 9th dimension, they are verbal. However, most of their communication occurs by symbols rather than in language verbally the way we do. And that was the main contributor to the misunderstanding between Anunnakis and humans. So in the intervening years, we have seen thousands of these saucer crafts, and our helicopters have chased them, and we point up at the sky and say, look over there, it's a bird, it's a plane, no, it's another saucer craft. They appear on the ocean, they appear over cities, they appear everywhere. But again, our governance, particularly NASA, doesn't want to talk about our relationship to those people who are coming here. In the 60s, beginning in 65, Russia and the United States retrieved saucer craft that had crashed into the ice and into the water and into the mountains. And retrieving the one in Russia in the ice was a particularly spectacular and difficult task, but they were able to do it. And so Russia and the United States have been able to back engineer saucer craft since that time. For the purpose, for what purpose? We're never told. It's secret, but what we hear from the scuttlebutt from Uncle Enki is that it's all just business. It's just business around the galaxy, and the businesses they're in are not the ethical kind of businesses we would want them to be in anyway. All right, and so back engineering weaponry is a way of saying that destroying things is what you're in the business to do. And NASA, okay, NASA bombed our moon with 2 rocket casings. They bombed Jupiter with a rocket casing. They bombed Saturn with a rocket casing. NASA needs to learn some manners and how to deal with the people that are not from here. Now, the light ships are different from the ones that we can begin to back engineer. The light ships are anti-gravitational ships that are fundamentally different from what we know as matter. And they are very difficult to follow and very difficult to understand, because sometimes they fly in erratic patterns, like a fly flying around in the kitchen, okay, which is not normal or natural flight pattern. And so for that reason, people find them a little more frightening. I don't know of anyone who's ever witnessed a light ship coming down and people walking out of it. Generally, the metal ships are the ones that have ETs in them that are like us, and the light ships are significantly different. This is the kind of pattern that you see orbs or the sylphs, whatever you want to call those lights in the sky that move so quickly This is the kind of patterns that they follow, which is not in accord with our understanding of mass and momentum and how you get around. Now, sometimes the lights are vehicles, but sometimes lights are beings. Now, we're already familiar with what an angel is from our ancient sacred writings. But the beings coming to us from space, you see here the one on the right, it's a light being that I was able to transmit into different colors, doesn't fit into our society very well. So when you see a light in the sky, we don't really know whether it's an orb or whether it's a vehicle. And this is what we have yet to learn. How to be hospitable with those who have never harmed us is another question. This particular group of pictures from Texas, one of these light beings was in the backyard of a home, and those pictures were the result. When you utilize a telescopic camera and look up close at these orbs or light beings, they show up as colors sometimes and just as white at other times. But we have yet to figure out who they are or what they are. They don't wear a name tag, okay? They don't wear name tags, and they don't speak to us in our language, which probably makes them a little bit scary. These particular pictures are of Mount Etna in Italy, and there's a group of lights you'll notice on the left, and you'll see that one of the lights is ascending up into a flight pattern. Those were beings, light beings, and here's a sylph that's an injured sylph, a light being, and we're just going to have to get used to the idea that some life forms are not like us. They don't walk around on the ground. Even so, the ships that we have seen take all sorts of different forms and formats and shapes. I would like to see a base where they can land and disembark and go to a restaurant and have a beer and find a hotel and spend the night and go shopping the next morning. I don't see any reason why the ET visitors can't be visitors, can't be tourists here. There's no reason to be automatically afraid of people. If we need to be automatically afraid of people, then what is all this fight over immigration about? Tell me, all right? So, a heretofore unknown technology sometimes just showed up. This particular, I call it an egg beater, showed up over Lake Tahoe in California back in 2005, and it hung around for several weeks, and a couple walked under it and took some pictures of it. It later floated on over to Capitola near Santa Cruz in California, and on its way back to wherever it was going, it happened to stop over the hills in San Jose, California, and I caught a glimpse of it there. That was a really astounding experience for me, and I have seen online that there are photographs. Somebody literally took the thing apart and took photographs of each and every piece of it. So they must have destroyed it. I have one picture here of an ET ship that had a sign on it. I can't explain it. It was awfully funny to find it. A karate sign on an ET ship. I cannot explain that. Now the tube vehicles. Belong to the Alpha-Draconis, and they are native to this world. And like the Bigfoot, the Alpha-Draconi apparently live underground and only surface in order to keep out of our way, to put it mildly, okay? Their ships have been seen regularly for decades, and the most recent picture I have of this one was on the moon. The most recent picture I have of one of their ships is from last year, 2018, and it was over Texas. Okay, and they all look like cigars or pipes of some sort. The people who are in these are reptoid people, all right? They're hominids like we are, but they are of the reptile variety, and they have a different emotional base than we do. Let's put it that way. I can't say what their ethic is because I've not met one, but you see, if we had an opportunity to meet one, we could find out, to communicate with them. All right, they've been around all this time anyway. Why can't we communicate with people who have apparently no reason to harm us? So that is the story on the Alpha-Draconis. Preston Nichols testified, this is the most recent picture. Preston Nichols testified that he worked with a reptoid at Montauk back until 1983, and he told a marvelous story of the quirks of this lizard man that he was talking about. All right. Testimonies, all right. Because of the government policy of secrecy, the Battle of over Los Angeles in 1942 was only briefly mentioned, but I noticed it was significant that 1,700 shots of artillery were shot at it, and it didn't have any effect. This is the initial picture of the Roswell retrieval of the Roswell crash, and this is, I think this is a made-up picture of the guy who took some of the Roswell pieces home with him. All right, and their technology has created a whole new, it's a business. It's another opportunity to profit, but without giving us, the people, the opportunity to learn from the experience of the scientists in astronomy and astrophysics. NASA every once in a while will allow a picture to surface that shows something that they encounter that's a UFO, but they're very stingy about what they allow to be publicized. And I just don't think that's necessary. In 1952, a squadron of, it was either light beings or light vehicles, we don't know what, showed up over the Capitol in Washington, D.C., and I suspect that probably had something to do with the overreaction and paranoia of the U.S. government over the presence of an ET. This picture from 2005, I guess between 2005 and 2007, when the Tau 9 Treaty was being renegotiated, those ships showed up over Washington, D.C. 3 times that I saw from the Carillon. We still have large UFOs showing up quite often. The pyramid shows up over the ocean and over the pyramids of Giza. This sphere is from Norway. So if you follow UFO videos on YouTube, and there are a lot of them now that are just plain phony, all right, and I understand that. We have to put up with the disinfo. Scalar weapons, again, are an issue. In this particular set of pictures, a UFO uses a scalar weapon to destroy a military base, and it was either in Iraq or in Afghanistan. And these are laser strikes that resulted in the campfire and the car fire and the Santa Rosa fire and the Middletown fire. And one has to wonder how it is that Earth leadership has the opportunity to use scalar weapons against our own people, that just really doesn't make any sense to me. The other thing that doesn't make sense is what happens to the people who end up in FEMA camps. And one of the sets of pictures that I've been reporting on regularly has been the all-sky cam pictures that show asteroids and tubular UFOs parked over astronomical observatories, and when I re-render them, what it looks like is that people are embarking into those ships. So I'm wondering, okay, where who's leaving that way? Okay, that's something that we can wonder about. This is a picture of Ariel, the Syrian who was part of the Roswell, was one of the Roswell crash survivors, and he survived 6 weeks with his human captors. All of the ETs who survived whatever it is brought them here are treated like criminals and captured and kept incarcerated and incommunicado. And what we don't get often about them is their name and is where they came from. You know, they're people like we are. They're intelligent people. They're actually riding around in spaceships, so they have to be intelligent people. Why can't we know them personally? This is one of my really deep issues with the policies that turns them, whatever ET shows up here, as a prisoner of the state in a detention center. That's one of the things Enki says he has to be very, very careful about. If he were to show up here, what kind of a reception would he get? You know, Marduk got taken out on the moon. There was one ET that was treated with respect, and that was Val Valerian from Venus. Okay, he was treated with respect, and he tried to assist President Eisenhower from 1957 to about 1959 during the time of the negotiating of the Greada Treaty. But to my knowledge, that's the only ET who has been treated with much respect. Except for this guy. This was Enlil, and he's deceased now, and he's involved with Ninar, who's actually his son. The guy with the white hair is actually younger than the one with the dark hair, and they were involved in the renegotiation of the treaties in 2005. Okay, I found two photographs of people. These are photographs. They're pixelated. They're not drawings. I can't tell you where they are. I can't tell you who they are, but they're certainly interesting. I thought this reptoid woman was very interesting, and this guy was a real kick. Notice he has a toothbrush in one hand and a roll of toilet paper in the other hand, and you can see him saying, gee, I wonder what the toothbrush has to do with the toilet paper. I call him, Karsh. And then in Italy, back in about 2008, this egg arrived on in a backyard in Italy, and this I don't know if it was a bird or a mammal, it's kind of hard to tell, emerged out of it, and I believe it was quickly dispatched, but it certainly looks like a harmless enough being that we should have been able to learn from. You know, I think one of the things we can do with the ET presence is learn from them. You know, what are they going to do to us? We've seen lots of pictures of the live ones now. Now we'll look at the dead ones. Here's a gray who's suffering from trauma and eventually passes away. And here's the picture after he is deceased. And here is a picture after the Roswell crash of taking one of the one of the casualties. And here's one of the autopsies of one of those recent crashes. And more recently, in 2011 and 2012, we have a whole autopsy, a room full of people. We have ETs in formaldehyde in jars in laboratories, and this particular ET apparently worked underground for a while. So we know for a fact that there are people here who are not from our world, and we would like to get to know them. We would like to be hospitable. We would like to be civil enough to serve as a hospitality crew and deal with people in a decent and honorable way and not just shoot them out of the sky. As a grandmother, that does not make sense to me, okay? NASA does not recognize life forms that don't conform to their Homo sapiens format. Here is the Sylph, the light being that I referred to earlier, that NASA was completely unable to label or identify, and they considered it an object or a creature. And NASA's attitude that people from other worlds are objects or creatures, I find very objectionable. All right, so now you've seen the different kinds of ETs that show up here. They come in metal ships, they come in light ships, they come in light bodies, they come in gray bodies, they come in injured bodies. And according to David Paulides, there are a number of reasons why people disappear off of our world each year. It's about 40,000 out of the United States. They're either kidnapped or murdered or abducted, or they could be leaving via the Mandela effect, which is a time warp. So being afraid doesn't make us any friends. And that has been my report on the UFO situation since I've been cataloging these pictures around 2003, when Nancy Leader began her investigation of the Nibiru return. So that is Space History's report for this week. Thank you for showing up and taking an interest, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.